Welcome to Podcast on Demand. Hey there, story lovers. It's time to grab your favorite drink, settle into your favorite spot, and join us for another powerful, thought-provoking story that will stay with you long after the episode ends. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and tap the bell icon so you never miss an inspiring moment. Your support keeps us going, and it helps us share these stories with the world. Now, let's talk about a moment, a question, that silenced a room and stirred something deep in every soul present. Imagine a quiet church fellowship hall in Manchester, Kentucky. It's an ordinary space, usually filled with Sunday potlucks, Bible studies, and the cheerful buzz of community life. But on this night, the atmosphere was different. The crowd wasn't there for casseroles or hymns. They had come to hear President Donald Trump. Whether you love him, hate him, or land somewhere in between, one thing was certain. His presence filled the modest room like a storm cloud about to burst. The chatter of the crowd was a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Some were there out of admiration, others out of sheer intrigue. But one person in that crowd stood out, a small, quiet figure with a determination far bigger than her 9 years. Her name was Mercy, dressed in her best Sunday dress. She sat gripping a weathered, leather-bound Bible that had belonged to her great-grandmother. Its pages were delicate, its gold lettering faded with time, but to Mercy, it was a treasure, a symbol of everything her family held dear. Her mother leaned over and whispered, "You can ask him, but only if you're brave enough, and only if you really mean it." Mercy nodded, her heart pounding. She had rehearsed her question for weeks, scribbling it in notebooks during recess, murmuring it to herself at night. She wasn't asking out of simple curiosity. She was asking because her young heart needed an answer. As the evening unfolded, President Trump spoke about familiar topics, policies, achievements, the future of America. The crowd responded politely, clapping here and there, but the energy was far from his usual rally atmosphere. Mercy sat quietly, waiting, her small hands gripping the edges of her Bible. When the floor opened for questions, a line quickly formed. Adults stepped forward to ask about local concerns, national policies, and even to compliment his iconic red, "Make America Great Again" hat. But Mercy hesitated. Her legs felt wobbly, her heart thundering so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. Her mother gave her a subtle nudge, and somehow she found the courage to stand. As she moved to the front of the room, whispers rippled through the crowd. People noticed her, a tiny girl with a giant Bible, walking toward the most powerful man in the room. When her turn came, President Trump looked down at her. For a moment, his usual bravado softened. "And what's your question, young lady?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Mercy swallowed hard. Her small hands gripped the Bible so tightly her knuckles turned white. And then, with a voice that trembled but refused to break, she asked, "President Trump, what does God mean to you?" The room fell silent, completely silent. It was the kind of silence that makes you hold your breath, that wraps around you and presses down on your chest. For a man known for his quick comebacks, President Trump didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared at Mercy, then at the Bible she clutched. Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability rarely seen. Finally, he leaned against the podium, steadying himself. "That's a big question," he said, his voice lower and steadier than usual. "And it's not one I've always had the answer to." The crowd was stunned. This wasn't the fiery rhetoric they were used to. This was raw, unpolished honesty. "When I was about your age," he continued, "I had a lot of questions about God too. My parents would take me to church every Sunday. I remember sitting in the pews, staring at the stained glass windows, wondering if God was even listening to me." He paused, glancing out at the crowd, gauging their reaction. Mercy's wide eyes stayed locked on him, her Bible now resting a little more comfortably in her hands. "As I got older," he said, "life threw a lot of challenges my way. I faced losses, failures, and moments where I wasn't sure if I could keep going. In those times, I didn't always feel like God was with me. Sometimes I was angry at him. Sometimes I thought he had given up on me altogether. The room was captivated. People leaned forward, their faces etched with expressions of empathy and curiosity. "But I'll tell you this," he said, his voice firming up. "Even in my worst moments, I realize something. Faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting that, even when you don't see the whole picture, there's a purpose. There's something greater at work." Mercy's small frame seemed to straighten. Her tears glistened under the fluorescent lights, but they didn't fall. She was listening intently, as though her very soul depended on his words. President Trump looked directly at her. "And God, to me, is that purpose. He's the reason I keep climbing, even when the ladder feels like it's going to break. He's a reminder that, even when we fall, we're not done." The crowd remained silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Finally, Mercy spoke again, her voice clear despite the tears in her eyes. "My great-grandma used to say that too. She said God is always listening, even when we don't hear him." President Trump's face softened even further. "Your great-grandma sounds like a very wise woman," he said. "And she's absolutely right. Faith isn't about what we can see. It's about what we believe, even when it feels impossible." By this point, the room had transformed. Strangers exchanged glances, some wiping away tears, others nodding in agreement. What had started as a routine town hall had become something profoundly personal. President Trump straightened, addressing the entire room. "We live in a world that's always pulling us apart. Politics, opinions, differences. But faith? Faith has the power to bring us together. It reminds us that we're all climbing that same ladder, one step at a time, no matter how different our paths might look." The crowd erupted into applause, but it wasn't the raucous kind. It was heartfelt, grounded in a shared moment of connection. As the applause faded, President Trump turned back to Mercy. "Thank you for your question, Mercy. You've got more courage than most people twice your age. Don't ever lose that." The little girl smiled, a small, quiet smile that carried more weight than words ever could. And with that, the evening closed, but the impact of Mercy's question lingered. People left the hall changed, reminded that even in the messiness of life, there is something worth holding on to. Sparkles, if this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect. What does God mean to you? How has faith shown up in your life? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget, subscribe, like, and share this story with someone who might need a little hope today. Thank you for being part of our journey. Until next time, stay inspired, stay connected, and as always, God bless you all. Folded hands.